Okay, welcome in. This will be our quick history of Napoleon. This is going to be the guy responsible for the fourth stage of the French Revolution. While we watch this video, I want you to define the key terms, define what the three goals of the French Revolution were, and also for all the main events that happened in Napoleon's lifetime. I'd like you to categorize that as him helping the French Revolution, that would mean he's a hero, or hurting the goals of the French Revolution, meaning he's a villain. So let's first start off with the goals of the French Revolution. They're pretty simple. We covered them in the previous packet, but a nice review will help. Goal number one, liberty. Liberty is that idea of freedom, that French people are in control of their own destiny. This is something very common in America as well, this liberty, this idea of freedom. We can control where we work, what we do, what we pursue in life. That's liberty. Equality. Equality is almost synonymous with the term equality. So this is the idea that everyone in French society is going to be equal. There's not going to be this whole three estate thing they had earlier where there's the clergy on the top and then the nobility were more important than the rest of French society. No. Equality says, forget all that, we're all going to be equal. And then finally we have fraternity. Fraternity is kind of like brotherhood, or I'm trying to think of a better word for it, kind of a sense of belonging. There we go, a sense of belonging. Everyone in French society are going to feel like they belong. They're all working towards the same goal, the same mission. There you go. Those are the three goals: liberty, equality, and fraternity. So that's probably one of the first things you're going to have in your notes. Let's move on to the life of Napoleon, though. Remember, you're going to want to define the key words from the life of Napoleon, which I will slow down on during those parts. And then you will also want to fill out your T-chart as we view this video. So first up, we have his rise to power. We're not going to start or spend a lot of time on this, as this is not super important. The slideshow will be there available to you. But the main thing is Napoleon came from relatively nothing, so he had to kind of work his way up in a society that was very unequal, as we talked about earlier. The whole estate system, very unequal. Next up, we see that Napoleon was a big hero in the early stages of the French Revolution. He won this big battle called the Battle of Toulon, where he defeated the British and the Spanish. He was only 24 years old, and he did so good that he was promoted to general. So this is how he initially gains fame and notoriety. Next up, there's the Italian campaign. So as we learned previously, a bunch of people are invading France, or a bunch of nations are invading France. They're scared that the ideas of the French Revolution, aka liberty, equality, and fraternity, and potentially the more crazy stuff like chopping the heads off of their monarchs, are going to spread to the rest of Europe. And who do you think was in charge of the rest of Europe? That's right, monarchs were in charge. So they didn't want to get their heads chopped off, so they said, let's try to stop the French from spreading this revolution. A lot of them invaded France. Specifically the Austrians, the Austrian Empire, one of the most powerful empires at that time. But Napoleon defeated them too at various battles, and he is even more famous and beloved by the French people. Finally, you have Napoleon take power. He becomes so famous. People try to do things to him to try to make him lose power, lose popularity, such as sending him to Egypt for various reasons, but we won't go in depth there. Anyways, Napoleon is able to gain power in France through the Brumaire coup. Brumaire coup, that's just the name of a month in the new French calendar. This is where Napoleon takes charge and becomes leader of France through a military coup. It's initially just three people who are in charge, these three dudes. However, Napoleon eventually takes power for himself in the new 1800 Constitution, where he puts a vote. He says, hey guys, is it okay if I can be dictator for life? 99.9% of France said yes. We now know today that that's not actually that accurate. It was more like 82% of France. He kind of rigged the election. Napoleon rigged the election to say that 99% of France agreed with him. But 82 is still a pretty high number, so he nonetheless became dictator of France. That is your first vocab word, by the way, the Brumaire coup. Him taking power. Next up, we have Napoleon. He's actually in charge of France now. So the emperor's coronation, he crowns himself emperor of the French. You could argue that's not very egalitarian, saying that you're emperor of other people. Kind of putting yourself in a superior status. So maybe you would put that in the right-hand column of your chart, as I did for your example. Next up, you have a big vocab word, though, the Napoleonic Code. This is where Napoleon takes ideas from the Enlightenment, Rousseau, Locke, Descartes, and he tries to make France a modern, enlightened society based off of the ideas of the Enlightenment. Kind of like how America took these ideas of the Enlightenment and made our own constitution. So yeah, Napoleon modernized the laws from the Enlightenment, and it also created the framework for future laws in modern Europe. These laws treated a lot of people equal within society. So you could put that in the left-hand column of your chart. The Napoleonic Code brought a lot of equality under the law for French citizens. Because before then, if you're at a certain place in society, like a higher rank in society, if you did something kind of bad, you didn't get punished that hard. But if you're poor and you did something bad, you'd get punished really hard. Napoleon said that's messed up. He made the law equal for all people, or almost all people within his society. So that's pretty good. He also rebuilt France. He improved the infrastructure. He improved the education. He improved the sanitation. If you go to Paris or France today, you'll see a lot of it was mostly built by Napoleon. There's his little Napoleon N right there. So yeah, that's another thing you could put in the left-hand side. This is really helping the fraternity, and you could say education also helps the equality of France as it lets people rise in society because everyone has access to education. And then infrastructure and the beautification and the construction of cities will help the fraternity, the feeling of belonging. Everyone is living better lives together, so they'll feel like they belong a little bit more. You could put that in the left-hand side of your column. I'm not telling you what to do, but that'd be a good idea, right? Moving on to Austerlitz. This is probably the thing Napoleon's most known for, as well as one of your key vocab words. So, we'll get there. But first off, there were the coalition wars. Napoleon's a rising guy, a rising star. People are scared in Europe. All these other countries are scared in Europe of Napoleon's growing power, of Napoleon's spreading of the revolutionary ideas. They don't like this fake king becoming emperor of France. So there's 7 total wars, 7 coalition wars. Yeah, Napoleon's a bit of a warmonger. He started 2 of them. But you got to realize the other 5 were nations declaring war on Napoleon. So Napoleon, from his perspective, you could argue his perspective, he was fighting wars on the defensive, trying to save France and allow the revolution to continue. We won't talk about this, but we will talk about the Battle of Austerlitz. For reasons we won't get into based off of our limited time period together, Napoleon is a military genius. The Battle of Austerlitz, which is called the Battle of the Three Emperors. You have Napoleon fight all of Russia and also Austria. So he's kind of outnumbered. The odds don't look to be in his favor. However, he wins against all odds. Wow, what a guy. He additionally creates your next vocab word, La Confédération du Rhin. This is where Napoleon takes a bunch of territory. You can see this green stuff, away from enemies of France, specifically Austria and other people he doesn't like, and he creates his own client states, or his own puppet states, you might argue. This is where there are allowed to be kings and queens here, but Napoleon's truly the one in charge. Additionally, he actually put some of his family members in charge. He's trying to kind of start his own dynasty, you know? We'll talk about that a little bit later, but he's like, oh, sister, you get to be a princess of this state in Germany. Oh, brother, you can be a prince of a different little nation in Germany. So he's slowly like taking over territory. You could say that his creation of La Confédération du Rhin is a bit not egalitarian as well. He's putting his family members as princesses and princes of Europe. Isn't a prince in a position superior to that of a non-prince or princess? I would argue yes. In terms of the Battle of Austerlitz, maybe you want to put that in the hero portion of your chart because Napoleon is allowing the revolution to continue by defeating the enemies, Russia and Austria. We're trying to stop the revolution. Again, you can interpret things differently. You can maybe put it on one side or the other. Maybe you see Napoleon being a warmonger because you're like 2 of 7. That's still a lot. That's not really fraternity, or you could say that's fraternity or brotherhood. You could say that's not very liberty-like. There's not a lot of freedom when the leader of your nation is causing a bunch of wars. 2 out of 7 again. Finally, you see Napoleon. He's still great. He wins a bunch of military victories, defeats the Prussians, finally finishes off the Russians. But then there's something called the Treaty of Tilst, which is your 4th vocab word. Or my bad, your 5th vocab word. The Continental System. This is where Napoleon has defeated all of his enemies on the European continent. However, he still has one enemy left, that enemy being the British. So he decides to create the Continental System. This is a trade war. It's where he prevents all of Europe, including French citizens, from trading with the British. Why? He thinks that this will badly hurt the British economy. So he's like, I want to defeat the British. I can't invade them because they have that powerful navy and I have a powerful army, but I can't get my army from France to the British without a powerful navy. So I'm just going to defeat them, but like with money. I'm not going to fight a war against them. I'm just going to make them poor by not trading with them. This is something you can argue left or right side of your chart, and maybe villain, maybe hero. I'll go with the villain side just to make things easier for you. This is not very, how do I say this? This is not very liberty-like, telling people that they can't do business or buy things from another person just because you say so, because you don't like them. So yeah, I would say that's kind of villain-like of Napoleon to try to make the Continental System when he's supposed to be the champion of liberty, equality, and fraternity. And it's important to note that this system kind of failed. It hurt the French's economy just as much or even more so than the British economy. All right, so now we have Napoleon's decline in power. This is where things kind of get pretty sour for him. Let me do a time check real quick. I can't see. I guess I'll stop when I stop. All right. So Napoleon, again, kind of talking about La Confédération du Rhin. We're bringing up that idea that Napoleon wants to create his own empire with his own family in charge, right? Well, he decides to invade Portugal, one, because they weren't following his law of the Continental System. They were still trading with the British. But two, because he wants to actually invade the entire peninsula and create a new dynasty under his own reign. He's going to try to put his brother, Joseph, and defeat the Spanish monarchs and make Joseph the King of Spain. King Jose the First is what he names his brother. But it doesn't really work out so well. Spain's not very happy of like a French guy becoming in charge of their country. It's kind of bad. So they decide to fight a guerrilla war where even though their army lost, Napoleon defeated their army, the citizens rise up and do these targeted little attacks and assassinations and attack supply lines and kill as many French soldiers as possible and run away before the French can respond. So you could say this dynastic ambition is definitely against equality because Napoleon is trying to make his brothers and sisters and his family superior to the rest of the citizens of Europe. Then you have Russia. This is the thing he's most known for. Basically, kind of like Portugal, Russia ignores the Continental System. They keep trading with the British. Why? Because everyone who doesn't trade with the British is getting poor. So they're like, I don't want to be poor. They keep trading with the British. So then France gives them an ultimatum. He says, stop trading with the British. The Russians say, I don't know what you're talking about. So Napoleon invades them. Yeah, Napoleon being a warmonger, definitely against the liberty idea. So you can say the invasion of Russia is something you can put in the left-hand side or the right-hand side of your chart. He's a villain. So yeah, Napoleon tries to win a decisive battle, but the Russians just keep running away. Napoleon does win some battles, but he slowly runs out of troops. You hear about the wintertime killing a lot of his soldiers. Actually, it was more like summertime killed his soldiers. They didn't have food. There's a lot of disease, the heat, and yeah, the cold, but mostly the heat and the diseases killed all of Napoleon's troops. So this is his first significant military defeat. Napoleon's army is weakened. Now you have everyone else sensing blood for Napoleon. They're like, this guy he's done for. So they all declare war against him again. This is like the War of the Sixth Coalition. This is their sixth try to defeat Napoleon. They're like, first, second, third, fourth, fifth time wasn't the charm, but maybe the sixth. Maybe we can finally beat this guy. He's a military genius, but his army got wiped out. Maybe we can win. So you have basically all of Europe declaring war against Napoleon. It's the Russians, the Prussians, the Austrians, the Swedish, the British, the Spanish, the Portuguese, and now even the Italians, all against France. Napoleon actually does okay. He manages to win some battles in 1814, but unfortunately for him, I guess, at Leipzig when he fights for the future of Germany, he is badly defeated. You can see this little graph. Napoleon is completely surrounded by a superior number of foes, and his army is nearly wiped out. Napoleon is then exiled to Elba after trying to do some things, but Napoleon is sent away to an island. And the French monarchy, the Bourbons, come back, and this is the end for Napoleon. Or is it? He actually returns to power. He just snuck away. Don't ask me how, but